What can we say from the picture that we've learned so far from the initial hours of this attack and the way that Iran then turned the game and tried to respond?
Well, it sort of explodes the myth of Iran as this great authoritarian state, that this state that's monitoring everything that everybody does and that's just hauling people off to prison at the drop of a hat. It exposed that Iran had a terrible counterintelligence system, terrible, almost naive in their trust, which suggests that, actually Iran, despite the, Western propaganda of Iran being this, Islamic state were rigidly ruled, women are beaten constantly, etc., just not true, because these kinds of extensive intelligence networks were up and running. And look, you got to give the Israelis, the Zionists, credit to have mounted an operation of this size and this scale. It really is, it's stunning. But it also exposes the limits of these kinds of intelligence operations. I think on paper, the Zionists fully expected that this would cause the regime to collapse in Iran, and that therefore that would, quote, that would eliminate the threat. As if any of these regime removals anywhere, whether it's Libya or Iraq or Panama or Syria, has, quote, eliminated the threat or brought peace, made things normal. This is a case of awakening Iran to really the full deceit and the full evil that is represented by Israel and the United States and Europe, in my view. The history of the last 60 years, for my country, I'm ashamed of it. My country was supposed to be a place of freedom and liberty and promoting freedom. Instead, we become agents of murder and mayhem. And we kill foreigners with no regard whatsoever. And then wonder why people don't like us. I mean, it's, God, it's a disease. And so in allowing, because Iran's known for years that the United States is working through groups like the MEC, the Mujahideen al-Khalq, to carry out terrorist operations. And they carried out previous assassinations, but nothing on this scale. Iran needs to fight back. And, ideally other countries will come to the aid of Iran. Pakistan is at least saying, whether they would actually do it or not, that if Israel hits Iran with a nuclear weapon, that Pakistan will hit Israel. We don't know what's being said behind the scenes with Russia and China, particularly Russia talking to the United States. Just before we came on air, I mentioned to you that the news has flashed across the screens that the bilateral talks that were set this week between Russia and the United States to talk on easing, getting back to normal diplomatic relations were unilaterally canceled by the United States. This is, it's either Donald Trump or Marco Rubio or both. Trump is proving himself to be worse than even his most ardent haters could imagine. And he's leading the United States on a path to destruction, in my view.
Larry, what's the problem do we know why did they decide to do this with Russia? Is that related to what's going on in the Middle East or
No
something else?
idea. There's other news last night of at least 24 super tankers, military aircraft that do air refueling, were now leaving the United States, headed overseas. Uh, they're going to bases. It's not. I don't know where they're going. I don't know if they're going to bases in Europe or bases outside and around the the Middle East. But that kind of movement of aircraft is indicative of plans for significant air operations. And, that's not a good sign. If, despite Trump's claims that, you know, uh, he didn't, now he knows, hey, I didn't know anything about this war. No, that's good. We're going to have peace. Anytime Trump now is talking about the possibility of a peace agreement, you take that as a sign that there's something. There's going to be an attack of some sort by the West. It's a complete lie. What Trump has accomplished over the course of the last 2 weeks now is prove that he cannot be trusted. Not a thing that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth can you trust. You always have to assume the worst about him, unfortunately.
Yeah. Here is Larry what Naftali Bennett put on his.
They're a bunch of arrogant pricks. Excuse my language, but show me one time where assassinating these top leaders has brought the people rising up to do what Israel wants to happen. Israel's got a sordid track record stretching back at least 50 years. Let's go back to their attack on Black September after the Munich Olympics, the assassination of the deaths of the Israeli athletes, actually caused by the Germans, but that's a whole nother story. But then they decided to track down all of Black September and kill them. That'll teach them. That'll stop the violence. Well, it didn't. Then with the creation of Hamas, again, which Israel helped fund, they ultimately murdered Sheikh Yassin, this elderly guy in a wheelchair. And did that weaken Hamas? No. In fact, you can make the case that it actually pushed Hamas in a more extreme direction, or one more committed to fighting as opposed to negotiating in peace. So time after time after time, Israel has embarked on this campaign of murder. And you know what's so ridiculous about it all is this is all predicated on a belief that this Old Testament, that this Bible is the holy word of God, whoever that is, because this God, while it starts off with God created everything, which means he created Iranians and he created Chinese and he created North Koreans. But then all of a sudden, no, this God only loves one kind of people. And those people are so special that they get to kill and destroy everybody else because they're loyal to this God. When you step back and just objectively read that, right away you're dealing with a demonic being masquerading as some holy deity. And, I meant it when I said that Jewish leaders have been engaged with this decapitation strategy. It goes back 2,025 years. They used it against Jesus. Yeah, we'll kill Jesus, man. That'll stop this movement. And because really what Jesus represented was a complete rejection of this Zionist theology. Ridiculous. But here we are, trapped by it. And you've got people like the U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, oh, this is fulfillment of God's prophecy. You know, the fact that people want to believe in that nonsense. And look, I was raised believing in it, and light came on in my brain. This is a lie, and it's a pernicious lie being used to justify murder and destruction, and it needs to come to an end.
Here is to understand what's going on with the attacks, Iranian attacks on Israel. Here is what the Israeli military specialists.
We're going to continue to do enrichment. This really, the whole enrichment of uranium and, Iran's trying to get a bomb. That is just, it's an excuse. It's a diversion. That's not the issue. The issue is they don't want to have Iran as an Islamic republic, because Iran as an Islamic republic is a threat to Western interests that want to take over, dominate, and control the oil resources of Iran, and to control Iran in a way that they will be able to stab at the underbelly of Russia coming up through the south. It is the same kind of thing that was done to Saddam Hussein. Only then it was, weapons of mass destruction. We've got to get rid of those weapons of mass destruction. That's why we got to attack him. And again, it had nothing to do with actual weapons of mass destruction. That was just that was the ploy, the ruse. It was more about getting regime change. And again, the United States cocked that up. That, Iraq today is not a great friend of the United States, and certainly not a place that the United States can easily control. So this desire to take Iran apart and use the nuclear development of a nuclear bomb, which they're not developing. And the CIA has been very clear on that for more than 20 years. And, within that, Iran continued to participate as part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, continued to allow IAEA inspectors on scene, certainly doing something that Israel doesn't allow. And yet we buy into this nonsense that Iran's the bad guy and Israel's somehow the victim here. It's just perverse.
Right now in Iran, there's serious arguments, there's serious discussions. They're talking about to get rid of NPT and get out of the NPT. And many people are arguing, those people who are mostly in favor of negotiations right now, talking about getting out of NPT.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the outcome of this sort of madness on the part of the West, Larry. And it seems that the plan for this attack on Iran was prepared long before Donald Trump coming to power. And Donald Trump has decided to go along with the plan on the part of Netanyahu. Do you understand what in his mind, in this sort of attitude, that while you're negotiating, you're making Iranian to feel that they're going to get something through negotiations, then you attack them?
They did it to Nasrallah. Remember, Nasrallah was meeting with other senior Hezbollah leaders at this location in Beirut to discuss a ceasefire, to discuss a peace agreement, at least temporary, with Israel. And that had been communicated to the United States, it's communicated to, all it was they were using those talks as a ploy to identify him so they could kill him. And they're doing the same now to Iran. And hell, I'd say they've been trying to do the same to Russia. The United States is not a trustworthy negotiating partner. and that's what is becoming clear. And it is there's this cartoon strip in the United States with Charlie Brown, and Lucy was always the antagonist, where she'd have him try to kick the football, put the football out, and Charlie Brown would run up and she'd pull it away and he'd fall. Okay, that's funny. United States, though, is like an evil version of Lucy, and we keep pulling the football away, causing other countries to fall, and it's through lies and deception.
I talked with Larry with Colonel Jacques Beau, and he suggested that maybe the way that the United States is behaving finally bring Russia and China and Iran to some sort of conclusion that no one would trust anymore the United States. This is hugely influencing the future of the planet, I would argue, because if anything big happens with the nuclear weapons, something in that nature, that would be the end of all of us, not just a little bit there and here, and all of us we're going to go down, and they're literally destroying the planet.
Well, it would destroy. I don't share quite that apocalyptic vision. Those places that were hit would, in the same way that, Hiroshima and Nagasaki did not disappear from the earth. The people didn't all disappear. But good Lord, it created enormous death and destruction. And certainly will make, if we call what passes for normal civilization in some areas of the world, impossible. But, frankly, there'd be large areas of Africa that would be protected, large areas of South America. There'd be climate consequences, I'm sure, but those would be temporary. But life, civilization in the north and throughout parts of the Middle East would certainly come to an end. And it's just, I said, it's a madness. The Russians understand that, because, they've paid a price previously in war. And that's why Putin has been working very assiduously trying to prevent this from escalating. But you've got, with Donald Trump and his delusional mind, oh, we got the best military in the world. Oh, we're the most powerful. And it's not true. But when you start believing, your own lies, and you act according to those lies, you're capable of doing anything. So this is, the ball is in Trump's hands now, as far as instigating this. And I think Jacques, Colonel Beau is correct that, well, let me put it this way. What we're seeing is the United States in desperation mode, trying to maintain its control as the world hegemon. It's been the, quote, superpower over the last 30 years, since the collapse of the Soviet Union. With the rise, if you will, the resurrection of Russia